Good? Okay. So we've covered the risks to the body. Now we're going to get into the risks to the mind. And a lot of those risks come out in areas that we don't necessarily think about until it becomes too late. I use that little transition because quite oftentimes when you're under a crisis, that's how your mind feels. Like there's a whole bunch of little pieces spinning around and you just kind of don't know what's going where. So one of the biggest, most common risks of the mind is sadness. Feeling sadness is common. It's normal. It helps us to choose the moments that we like and the moments that we don't. Maybe we feel sad because we said something and upset a friend of ours, so we're going to choose to maybe take a moment and pick our words more carefully. Maybe we have a sadness because we lost someone close to us, and it teaches us to draw ourselves closer to maybe someone who we've been estranged from. You never know. Again, you see this a lot in funerals. The beautiful thing about a funeral that I found is it's a time when people who quite oftentimes have not talked to one another in months or even years, they come together once again to share in that person's life. And I always encourage anyone who is a family member I've talked to, always encourage them to take that sharing, take that closeness that they have at that funeral and bring it forward with them into the next day. Because guess what? You all need each other in times of mourning. So sadness can be something that's beneficial to us. It's when you can't get past it. So many of the things that we're going to talk about is when you can't get past it. When that sadness just won't let go of you. When sadness fails to leave you at an appropriate time. Who's to say what appropriate is? You are. You know. You know how long it takes you to. Again, some people can process a traumatic event quickly and move on, and some people it's going to take years. Some people it's going to take professional help. There's nothing wrong with that. But knowing that when it's not leaving, when it's not letting go of you, that's when you need to look for help. Don't be afraid to seek out help. Again, going back to the myths and facts when it comes to resiliency, that looking for help is not a failure. It's a tactic. Again, I bring up the couch. You wouldn't move that couch by yourself. Why would you move this thing that's weighing heavily up here? Why would you think you had to move that by yourself? This is another big one. This is something that sometimes we don't think about. Normally I enjoy, me personally, I love my job. Absolutely love it. If something's bothering me where I can't get any joy out of it, I need to look at what's going on in my life. Let's say I enjoy gardening. I go out there, I tend to the plants, and I just don't get the same thing out of it. That's a good indicator that something's wrong, that something's bothering me. Family and friends, that is a big one. Normally you love getting together with your family, but now every time we sit down, there's just so much tension, so much unknown. I'm not comfortable with this. What's going on? It could be that your mind is suffering from some kind of crisis. Maybe you're picking up on someone else's in the room. It's very common, especially with people that we care about. And how about just life in general? You know what? Life's hard. It's going to be hard. But that doesn't mean that we can't have some good moments along the way. I mean, we're covering some pretty dim material, some pretty dark material today. We've had a couple laughs, right? Well, guess what? Life, if you get to the point where you simply find nothing in life that you enjoy, that's a big risk. That's a sign that something is really, truly wrong. That something needs to change. Social distancing. This is something that, again, they call it being withdrawn. You see it very, very commonly. You have the coworker, normally, she's the lady that, brings in the donuts or, always has a great joke. and now she's just kind of sitting in a corner by herself. It's a good indicator that something's wrong. You have a family member who normally is in the middle of things, He's the guy that always has a joke or always has a story, and yet now he's off in the corner by himself. That's an indicator that something's wrong. When you find that you yourself are withdrawing, hey, come on, we're having a family barbecue this weekend. I'll try and make it, okay? You know in the back of your mind that normally you love doing this. You love getting together. You love seeing these people. You know there's going to be great food, but you just don't know if you can handle being there. That's a good indicator, again, that something's wrong. That's a risk. People in general, when I was at my worst, the last thing I wanted to be around is people. Sometimes even my own family. I just wanted to be in my quiet little cave where I could control the environment and I didn't have to worry about anything bothering me. Or even at a family gathering, you'd see me and I'd be here against the wall. Now, a lot of that comes from my background in the military and in law enforcement. But it's when that inhibits the ability to live your life. I used to get so angry because I would want to go to events for my kids. Music, school performances, sporting events. And I couldn't even stand being there. I couldn't even stand to really enjoy the event because I was so nerved up because I didn't like being around all those people. That was a big factor, and I missed out on a lot because of it. It was something that I had to work through, that I had to learn how to bounce back from. Anxiety, another big one. Always feeling on edge. They call that the survival mindset. You have a plan, you have a reaction, you have something tuned in to where if something happens, you know how you're instantly going to react. I know right now I have a door to my back. If that door comes open, I know I'm going to go low, get behind it, and get ready to take the person out. Should I have that in my mind? Is there really, rationally, is there any danger of that door flying open and someone aggressing into this building? No. But when our mental health is suffering and we're used to dealing with particularly traumatic experiences involving other people, that's where we're at. We're reactive. Drop a book on a table and I can just about guarantee you're going to know who the veteran in the room is. It's not healthy. It's a terrible way to exist. But guess what? It's something that we can work by, that we can work past if we learn resiliency. So I love this graphic. It's one I just happened to come across, and he's at the first point. So here's the activating event. Maybe the activating event is he's involved in a car accident. So he says, okay, well, I'm going to take a step back, and I'm not going to drive. I'm not going to get in a car unless I have to. But the memories still hold on, so he takes another step back and says, I'm gonna try and avoid traveling. So he takes another step back and says, well, if I have to get in a car, I'm gonna do something to numb out. I'm gonna take medication. When that medication's not enough, I'm gonna take a sip of alcohol. What's happening? He's backing up, back further and further towards the edge of the cliff until what? He falls off. That's when the bad stuff really happens. That's what we're about to get into. So what's the worst that could happen? Mental health disorders. They're more common in our world than we think. Addiction. Again, I guarantee everyone here knows someone in their life who is addicted to something. I promise you. I can guarantee it. Self-harm. See this with a lot of veterans. Didn't die overseas, so I'm going to find a way to end myself over here. They call it like a feeling of invincibility. Really what it is that it's a desire to replace the adrenaline that you felt in combat. It's very destructive. And finally, suicide. Okay, couple of mental health disorders. Depression. 8.3% of adults will experience episodes of major depression. Major depression are episodes that require medical intervention or counseling. They require drugs or formal counseling. Adults between 18 and 25 have the greatest issues with depression. 18.6%. Why do you think that is? Think of the turmoil of when you got right out of high school. Did you really know where you were headed? Did you really know where you're going? How much of our lives change when we think we graduate from high school, we think we're ready to just take on the world, right? What happens? The world just kind of kicks us in the face and says, ha ha, not going to happen. So quite oftentimes, between those ages, our desires change, our goals change, our relationships change. All this chaos when we think we've got it all together. But as I always say, what happens when we think when we think we've got it all together? The world laughs. I think we got it figured out. And the good Lord says, hold down there, Skippy. You're going this way. Which is fine, because you know what? It's what led me here, so I'm happy about it. 20% of teens will experience a major episode of depression. Think about this. As adults, we love to look back to our teenage years with these rose-colored glasses. Oh, I remember, prom, and I remember, hanging out at the lake, and I remember this. What we fail to realize is, guess what? Being a teen is tough. It's very difficult because guess what? You have all these expectations that are being placed upon you. You've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to do this. Your friends are telling you've got to, your friends and your classmates are saying, you've got to wear these clothes, you've got to wear, have, this brand of shoes. Mom and dad are saying, no, you got to plan for college, you got to save your money, you got to, wash the dishes, take the dog out, take the trash out. And here you're going, I want to do my own thing. So guess what? There's a lot of turmoil when it comes to those teenage years. Yes, I'm sure every one of us can look back to parts of our teens that were enjoyable. But remember, when you were going through it, all the angst, all the stress that you felt, well, guess what? The same kids are going through the same thing. And these days even, they're going through even a worse version of it. Because when there's things like bullying going on, when we were kids, we could go home and we could avoid it. Today, kids can't because of these. They don't have that. They fear disconnection so bad, they can't just go home and get away from it. So remember that with teens. Post-traumatic stress. Now, a lot of people just confuse post-traumatic stress with PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. Nearly everyone, will go through some form of post-traumatic stress. It's natural. 70% of adults will experience in all honesty, I'm going to say that almost all of us will go through something traumatic, something that's changing, that's significant mentally in our lives, right? It's if you can't get past it. And post-traumatic stress is, again, a lot of people associate it with things like war or things like sexual assault. But it can be something as simple as it can be something as simple as the way a relationship was, something that put you on edge from that relationship. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be a romantic relationship. It could be a friendship. If you have a friend that's always got you on edge, you're always worried about they're judging you, or how they're going to react to something. Well, guess what? That could be traumatic. 20% of those adults will develop post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder is that moment where it won't go away, where you're always on edge. You're always looking for that event or something like that event to occur. Part of PTSD is you always look for crisis in your life. You expect it. You know, for a while, I could say it kind of felt like you were afraid to be happy because every time you were happy, you were expecting the next bad thing to happen to destroy that happiness. It's a terrible way to live. But so few people get past it. And like I said, PTSD can come from a multitude of sources. It's when you're unable to process and unable to get past something that's happened. Addiction, physical addiction. Again, out here, this is probably one of the most common ones we see, alcohol. It's because it's so easy to get your hands on, right? 88,000 deaths every year relating to alcohol abuse in the U.S. 15 million people struggle with alcohol addiction. Now, when it comes to addiction, a lot of people think that it's a constant, everyone's got to be, people think with alcoholism, people have to be drunk all the time. No, sometimes it's, anytime something bad happens, that's where I run. Quite oftentimes that happens out here, again, because we're not lucky enough to have a multitude of services to go through to get help. So we do that, this little self-medicating. We do it the first time just because, my girlfriend cheated on me, boyfriend cheated on me. Well, I'm going to go out and party, and I'm going to take a few drinks just to feel better. The next day the pain hasn't gone, so you take a few more. It's when you can't say, okay, I'm done, and walk away. Drunk driving causes a death every 39 minutes in the U.S. Which means since we've been here, 3 people have died due to alcohol related, whether it's themselves or whether it's an innocent bystander. Good friend of mine, she shortly after she got out of high school, was engaged to a wonderful guy. He was driving home from work one night, got hit head on by a drunk driver. She's going the wrong side down the interstate, hit him head on. She walked away. He was killed instantly. And it's something, unfortunately, that, again, out here in particular, we've almost accepted. You hear the terms like booze cruising, or, it's just a little buzz, I can get home. Drugs. This number is actually a few years old. It is actually a lot lower. Last year, there were over 100,000 deaths just due to fentanyl, just due to one drug. The overall drug toll last year, if I remember correctly, was almost 200,000. People say, it's their choice. Unfortunately, with so many of those drugs, people think that they're taking one thing, but it's laced with something else. %13 of people over 12 use drugs monthly. Again, someone in your life, very likely you know someone. 4% of addicts admit to using before their 12th birthday. We had a guy that we had in the jail. Actually, two guys that were young friends. They've been friends ever since middle school. They were kind of the outcasts of the school. Both had one of which had a home life you wouldn't wish on any child. he was unfortunately very, very hard to manage in the jail as well. His mind was almost completely gone. In fact, he's in Pueblo now. Permanently. He'll never be back out on the streets. The kid that was his friend that was in there at that time kind of shrugged and said, "I wish someone had told us at 13 years old you're not supposed to do acid." It cooked his brain. The other kid, fortunately, he went through a rehab program, and last I knew, he's doing well. But the other one, he'll never live a good life. It had so destroyed his mind. Those two had started using pot about 10 years old. By the time they hit 13, they were doing whatever hard drugs they could get a hold of. The entire purpose of it is for the same thing: to try and numb out, to try and dull whatever's going on in their systems, to try and, instead of feeling the highs and the lows, so oftentimes they just don't want to feel anything. They'd rather feel nothing than the pain of whatever's gone on. Again, I guarantee we've known people like that. It's unfortunate, but it's all in the intent of the same purpose. In talking about addiction, we also have mental addiction. Pornography is one of the most common addictions out there right now because it's so prevalent. It's so easy. They say that the average youth today gets exposed to pornography online by the age of about 9. Unfortunately, and again, it's so oftentimes used. Societally, we look at, we kind of look past it and say, well, it's not a big deal. I mean, there's entire websites of people promoting the idea that, hey, it's your body, why not put it out there? It destroys lives. For those consuming it, it causes irrational expectations. People don't know how to have a functional relationship because they're just used to seeing this little caricature. Reduces gratification because, again, it takes that fantasy out of it. The world's not really like that. Loss of connection, that's a big one. 56% of divorces cite porn or porn addiction as a factor. And it's a giant waste of time. One of the largest online distributors reports 64 million views every day. 64 million, with the average view being around, think about it, if the average view is around, let's say, 10 minutes, 640 minutes of life every day spent just viewing porn. Another one, and this one has become fairly common, is gaming. Now 66% of the population are regular gamers. Again, I'm going to raise my hand on that one. I was playing games earlier today. But it's when you can't give it up. It's when you can't step away from it. There was a story I read years ago of a young man, and he was 19 years old. He had graduated from high school, and he was so addicted to gaming. His parents had told him, "Hey, you need to go out. You need to get a job. You need to do something." And he says, "But I've got to get to the next level. I've got to do this." And his parents finally, in this desperate attempt to get him to do something else other than game, they took his TV and his game system away. That following night, he took his life. He was so addicted to it, he couldn't see his life without it. Gaming is not only a male, we tend to look at it as as a male industry, but 46% of gamers are female. Addiction to gaming leads to neglect of relationships. It contributes to fatigue, poor work and school performance. And it contributes to a lack of performance in day-to-day activities. We see this, again, we see this quite a bit. People who would rather sit at home on a game than go outside and touch some grass, go out with friends. I've got my friends online. Okay, but how many of those friends have you actually met in person? Don't get me wrong, it's kind of neat. I've actually gone online and I've played games with people with a guy from New Zealand. It's really neat. But again, it's when it becomes an addiction, when you cannot step away from it. And again, this has become so common. This is the biggest one right now, and it's a big one that is destroying relationships. Social media platforms drive surges of dopamine, the feel-good chemical, to the brain, keeping consumers coming back over and over again. The shares, likes, and comments of these platforms trigger the brain's reward center, resulting in a high similar to the one people get when gambling or using drugs. Think about this. No rational person would walk up to their adolescent. You walk up to their 13-year-old and say, here, Susie, have a little bump of Coke. Right? But yet we walk up and we say, here, so you can keep in touch with your friends. And how many parents monitor it? Now, most of those platforms say, well, you've got to be 16 in order to get on. And but you know what all that requires? Checking a box, yes. And so many of them, even when it's shown that the children are underage, they do nothing about it because they say, well, that's a you problem, not a me problem. Social media addiction. This is the quoted statistic. It's a lot higher than 10%. I'm going to say it's probably closer to 30%. They say social media addiction affects around 10% of Americans. 30 to 40% of Americans admit to thinking about their social media accounts while working or in school. There was one school, and I think it was in Baltimore, they actually had to remove the mirrors in the girls' bathroom because the girls were leaving class to go make TikTok videos in the bathrooms. Social media leads to unrealistic life and relationship expectations. You only see the extremes. Think about that. You're getting a tiny, tiny little snapshot of someone's life. And guess what? Our minds, when we're only getting a tiny bit of information, we create stories. Here's Pam, and on the beach in on the beach in Mexico, having a great time. Pam's life looks so perfect. Why can't I have that life? Well, you don't know the fact that photo was taken right after Pam and her husband just had a fight, and she was on the beach because she was trying to get away from him. Or look at the flip side. Pam's going through a divorce. Oh, it's so terrible. My life's so much better by comparison. The truth be told is that social media promotes the highs and it promotes the lows, but where does most life exist? Right in the middle. So when we're looking at we think we're actually keeping in touch with people when really all we're doing is we're just getting that little snapshot, and we're assuming that that's what life is all about. Social media often leads to a lack of attention in relationships. I can tell you two very, very good friends of mine and my wife's almost got divorced over Facebook. The wife in that couple would get off work, she would go home, she'd put the laptop on her lap, get on Facebook. That's where she would be until bedtime. Quite oftentimes it was halfway through the night. Her children were suffering, her husband was suffering. Her husband was working a fairly demanding job getting home. and there'd be no clean dishes to make dinner in. You know, kids would be upset, and kids would be running around tearing up the house because they were little. We know how little kids are. Until finally, he looked his wife dead in the eye, and he says, either we shut down Facebook or I'm filing for divorce. He tried numerous times to ask her, hey, I need you to help out. But she was so addicted to Facebook that she let the whole rest of her life suffer. So a lot of the risks of addiction is eventually, quite oftentimes, addiction leads to self-harm. Remember, that's kind of down our little spiral. Reckless behaviors. Around here, this is one of the common ones, promiscuity. Ruins relationships, it ruins reputations, and makes long-term bonding difficult. We all know the hormone oxytocin. Oxytocin is the love hormone. Quite often achieved, during intercourse. Well, guess what? If you're getting that so often, you fry those receptors, and it actually leads to people having trouble bonding with one another. Risk-taking. Risk-taking, again, you see this a lot with veterans. Okay, I missed the adrenaline of combat, so I'm going to go home and I'm going to get myself the fastest motorcycle possible, and I'm going to go ripping down the road. Just to feel that rush again, to feel that adrenaline again. Well, suddenly going 85 on a motorcycle is not enough, so now I'm going 105, then I'm going 135. I hit a little bit of gravel and done. Acting out, you see this a lot with kids. Mom and dad are going through something, maybe they're going through a divorce. The kids are acting out because they don't know how to process, don't know how to vent that aggression. So they take it out on the teacher, they take it out on the classmates. Often leads to fights, loss of relationships, in school, suspension or expulsion. It can also lead to, we probably all worked with someone at one point or another who loved to cause drama in the workplace, right? Loved to stir the pot a little bit so they could sit back and laugh, right? That's a form of acting out. What does that do? Does anyone really want to be around that person? Overindulgence. We talked about alcohol, we talked about drugs, about food. It's a risky behavior when you use food to comfort yourself. It's okay. One of the reasons I said, we should have popcorn today is because popcorn is a common comfort food. It's something that brings us back to the nostalgia of, maybe watching a movie as a kid. Very common, but again, it's when we take those things that we enjoy and we just take them overboard. I can't have a piece of cake. I've got to have a big old slab of cake. I can't have a beer. I've got to have 6 of them. Self-inflicted injury, a lot more common than people think. A lot of cliches around it, but there's people who you wouldn't think of that engage in such activities. 17% of people engage or have engaged in self-harm. Most common one is skin cutting. Banging one's head. You see this a lot when people come into the jails. They're so angry they'll sit there and smack their head against the wall, sometimes to the point of knocking themselves unconscious. Burning. People will do that. Others are poisoning and infection. Sometimes physical pain is easier to deal with than mental pain. Guess who said that? Me. I got the marks right there. It was easier to deal with than what was going through my head. One of the bands I've come to really enjoy. I don't know what their history is, but I know that they seem to know a lot about mental health problems and depression. They're called Icon for Hire. One of the quotes, a quote from one of their songs is, "I don't care your intention, I just want you to know my self-hatred never took me where I wanted to go." None of this will ever lead to a better place. None of it. Finally, and unfortunately, this is something that far too many people, far too many veterans, far too many people out here have seen in their lives. Every day, approximately 121 Americans take their own life. It's one person every 12 minutes. They leave behind friends and families and loved ones who often never knew that there was a problem. Bring up to you one of my favorite actors, Robin Williams. It's kind of hard to read, so I'll read it for you. It says, "I think the saddest people always try their hardest to make people happy because they know what it's like to feel absolutely worthless, and they don't want anyone else to feel like that." As a kid, he brought so much joy into my life. I remember him, Mrs. Doubtfire, and he's the genie in Aladdin, and so much more. He brought so much joy to so many people, and yet he couldn't bring that to his own life. So he took his own life. Nationwide, suicide is the 12th leading cause of death. It is the second leading cause of death for ages, and I'm going to look at this first one first, 10 through 14 and 24 through 34. Think about that, 10 through 14. I did a research project in college where we were talking about cyberbullying. One of the first articles I read was a young boy at 12 years old, been getting bullied at school. His teacher had said, "Well, we all need to be on this chat for this is how I'm going to make sure you have your homework assignments and stuff like that." So he had his phone it wasn't on a phone, on his computer on the school site. Well, the school wasn't monitoring the site, and so every time the kid would open up this app or this site, there would be private messages telling him how worthless he was and how terrible he was. One morning, his mom walked out, and the kid was always playing up in this one tree in their backyard. And she looked up there, and there he was hanging from it. 11.3% of young adults admit to having suicidal thoughts. I'm going to say that number is probably pretty conservative because as adults, we don't really like to talk about the things that are wrong with us. Quite oftentimes, we'll be asked and we'll say, the biggest lie of 2 words in the world, "I'm fine." And out of all suicides, men make up about 80% of them. Quite oftentimes, as men, we feel like we have to process everything ourselves. We have to do everything ourselves. And when that fails, we see that there's only one way out. Again, one near and dear to my heart, the day I took that punching bag down was the day that a friend of mine, one of the guys I had deployed with, had taken his own life. Didn't make sense. We'd been back from Iraq for so long. He seemed like he was doing well. He just had his 3rd child born about a week ago. And his wife went out to the garage, and there he was. Now, if you know someone is implying or flat out stating that they're contemplating suicide, get them help. They may hate you forever, but at least they'll be alive to do so. Some of the clues, statements. World would be better off without me. No one will miss me. What's the point? Sudden isolation. Normally they're the happy-go-lucky person. Normally they're kind of the life of the party, and then all of a sudden they're away from everyone. Giving away of treasured items. Here, can you hold on to this for me? They want to make sure that the things that they care about are going to be cared about, so they're going to give it to someone that they know is going to take care of it. They seem to tie up loose ends. Hey, by the way, remember 4 or 5 years ago when I called you fat? I'm really sorry about that. Or another one, loss of appetite. What's the point of sustaining life if I'm looking to leave it, right? Another one, and I don't have this one on there, is a sudden sense of calm. Very, very commonly expressed amongst in suicide, because they finally have made peace with themselves. They know what they're going to do. All the turmoil, all that is gone now because they know where they're headed. Biggest thing that we were always told was ask them directly, are you thinking of harming yourself? They see something like, I don't know. Or maybe. Maybe they flat out say, yeah. Get them help. Stay with them. Know that you're not a professional psychologist or psychiatrist. Don't try to act as such. Call for help. Stay with them, providing that doing so is not going to place you in harm. If they're speeding down the road, you don't want to be with them, right? But if they're just sitting in a corner saying, I'm really just ready to be done, and you can do so, and you're going to be safe, stay with them. Quite oftentimes, the biggest reason that people want to leave the world is because they feel that they are alone. So sometimes staying with them. There was a great TED Talk that I listened to a few years back. It caught my eye because it was entitled, I Was Almost a School Shooter. Guy talked about how he wanted to die, and he was just filled with such anger that he just wanted to take his rage out on someone else before he left this world. He's been kicked out of his house. He was living in a friend of his garden shed. But every day his friend would come out and say, hey, come on in the house, let's watch a movie, let's go get a pizza, let's get a burger. That simple act of every day showing him that someone in his life cared prevented him from doing something truly horrifying. Sometimes the biggest thing that we can do for someone is just being there for them. Sometimes the biggest way we can help is just letting them know that we genuinely care. Listen to them, don't speak. Quite oftentimes, we like to solve problems. Quite oftentimes we get frustrated when there's problems that we can't solve. But the biggest thing is just sitting with them, again, letting them know that you're here to listen, letting them know that, again, like I said, that someone cares. Listen to them. Like I was saying as we were sitting here, the interview regarding the Columbine shooters. When Marilyn Manson was asked, what would he have said to them? He said, I wouldn't have said anything. I would have listened. Just simply be there for them. If you've ever watched the play or the movie that was made of Dear Evan Hansen, it's regarding a kid that, he's kind of a troubled kid, he's kind of a bully, but he ends up taking his own life. One of the quotes from it, I love it. It comes from one of the most famous songs in the movie. It says, even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. The nice thing about having our faith is, who will always find us? Christ will always find us. Even when we're at our lowest point, we are still always loved by Him. We're still always loved by God. And you know what? We're still always loved by everyone who loves as they were told to by God. Excuse me. Lamentations 3, verses 19 through, I guess I omitted the end of it, but would someone like to read that?
The thought of my affliction and my homelessness is wormwood and gall. My soul continually thinks of it and is bowed down within me. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness.
I chose this one because I remember back to when I was kind of at one of my lowest points. It'd been several years since I'd been back from Iraq. And see, the whole time I was over in Iraq, every day I prayed. Every time we were getting ready to go outside the wire, out into the danger zone. Well, it was all the danger zone, but before every mission, I'd pray. Then I got home. I couldn't bring myself to. I started drinking too much. I started a lot of self-destructive behaviors, a lot of behaviors that, again, like I said before, I wasn't realizing were really hurting the people that I cared about. Till finally it came to a head one day. I finally was driving down the highway out in the middle of the country. And I just, for the first time in a long time, I prayed. I said, God, why did I make it home from such a bad place to be living in such shame here? Why could I not have, died a hero over there rather than living with who I've become back here? And I prayed for the courage to end myself. God answered, but not in the way I expected. Song came on the radio, 3 Wooden Crosses by Randy Travis. I realized that I had not made it home. Not only would my wife and my daughter, my mom and my dad, my friends and my sister be left with a giant hole in their hearts, but that our twins wouldn't have existed. They would never been born. So I pulled over, I looked, I just started to cry. The last time I actually remember crying. When I got done, I got outside of the car, and it was a day about like today, beautiful blue sky, not too hot, no wind. I just looked up and I saw the sky for the first time in so long. I knew that I was here for a reason, but God wasn't done with me. 3 days later, I walked back into the church. I hadn't been in probably 8 years. Walked in and I sat down. I didn't feel like I was even worthy of being there. I was so filled with shame. One of the ladies in the church walked in, and I'd met her before years ago, but I really hadn't seen her since. And she just walks in and she sits beside me and takes my hand. Doesn't say a word to me, just sits and takes my hand. Sat there the whole service with me. That was confirmation from the Lord that I was where I was supposed to be. That's what's brought me to here and now. Because, if I can come back from that, anyone can. If the Lord can heal me, then he can heal anyone. Finally, my quote. This is, and God said, love your enemy. And I obeyed him and I loved myself. Jesus, when he's asked what is the greatest of the commandments, he says, love the Lord your God with all your strength, with all your mind, and with all your heart. And love your neighbor as yourself. Well, if you're going to love your neighbor as yourself, you must first do what? Love yourself. Remember always that no matter what is going on in our lives that the Lord loves us. If he didn't love us, he would not have sent his son to redeem all of us. As we conclude this session, I want everyone to definitely, out of this session, take a little bit of hope. Hope in the Lord, trust in the Lord. As it says, when the wolves come, stay close to the shepherd. No matter what anyone is going through, Lord's got our back. God's got our back. All we have to do is truly have faith in him. I'm just going to put this up, and like I said, this session is, as you can see, it's hard for me to get through, because again, a lot of the stuff I draw on from personal experience. A lot of the stuff is quoted, a lot of the stuff is cited, but a lot of this is just stuff that I learned the hard way. But the good stuff, the skills, is what's coming up. I would love to do this in a single session, but it would be probably about a 6 hour session. So coming up, what we're going to do is we're going to learn to be the ball. Like my dog, he's got his head. So, session 2 is going to cover a lot more of the mental practices. It's going to cover some stuff that we may have learned when we were younger, but we tend to forget. Things like goal setting. How do we set a goal? Well, we just kind of went through the church evalu with the SMART acronym.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of hits on a little bit of that. It also goes through things like mind traps. Mind traps are where our minds go when bad things happen and how we work past them. We'll also go through things like reframing your narrative with a big question. Why is the desk the mother of the chair?
Bounce back.
Not quite, but I'll leave you with that question because that's kind of a fun one. And it also covers things like opening your fences. So, we tend to build fences around ourselves, especially when we've had something traumatic happen. But guess what? For every fence you put in, the smaller your world gets. So again, the next session is going to be a lot of the kind of meat and potatoes of reframing your thought process, learning how to examine things differently, learning how to take, your mind, may tend to go all the way to the negative. Well, guess what? How are we going to get it readjusted? Well, we're going to teach ourselves how to go all the way to the positive. We're going to swing that pendulum, because guess what? The reality of the situation is probably right in between. So there are some great, again, session 2, which I'm hoping to do next month probably, with everything going on this month. But I'll let you know. Excuse me. So that'll be a lot of the meat and potatoes of kind of how to help fix what's up here. The final session of it, session 3, which we'll do eventually, is a lot of the practical skills that we need. Things like, have you ever thought to yourself, asked yourself, what do I need to sleep well? Most people haven't. They just go to sleep, right? Well, we're actually going to go over some tips and tricks to making sleep optimal. We're also going to go over some easy tips and tricks to making diet optimal. What we put in our bodies has a tremendous effect on how our minds function and how we feel. And you know what? If I asked you what is the method you use, or what are some tips to relaxing? Most people are kind of go, I don't know, do something you enjoy. Well, it's not as easy as that, believe it or not. So we're going to go over some practical skills to optimizing relaxation. So all that is in the third session. So I thank everyone for being here, for taking this interest, and I hope I'll see you in the next ones. And anyone who's watching this video, if you wish to join us for the other 2 sessions, please let me know. Send me a text or an email, and I'll make sure you get an invitation or a reminder. Thank you one and all, and God bless.